My name is Audra Kane, and for most of my 29 years, I felt more like a quiet footnote in my family's story than a main character. I am an archivist by profession, a keeper of other people's histories, which has always felt fitting for someone who's struggled to claim her own. I live in Seagrove, a small coastal city where the scent of salt and pine mingles in the air, and the fog rolls in from the bay to soften the edges of the world. It's a place that suits my temperament, steady, calm, and content with the quiet beauty of the everyday. Growing up, however, my life was anything but quiet. It was dominated by the brilliant, unwavering light of my older sister, Stella. She was, and is, the sun around which my parents, Catherine and Robert, have always orbited. Stella possesses a kind of effortless incandescence, with her sun-streaked blonde hair, my mother's cornflower blue eyes, and a laugh that could charm birds from the trees. She was born to be the center of attention. I, with my father's quiet hazel eyes and dark, unassuming hair, was born to be her shadow. Our family home, a rambling Victorian on a street lined with ancient oak trees, was a testament to Stella's radiance. The mantelpiece in the living room was a shrine to her accomplishments, equestrian ribbons, first-place debate trophies, and later, her acceptance letter to a prestigious East Coast law school, framed in polished silver. My own achievements, such as winning the statewide historical essay contest or graduating magna cum laude with a degree in archival studies, were met with a distracted, "That's lovely, dear," before the conversation inevitably, inexorably, returned to Stella. I remember my 10th birthday with a clarity that still brings a faint ache to my chest. I had asked for a simple garden party with my two closest friends. My mother had promised, but on the morning of the party, Stella announced she had qualified for a regional writing competition that very afternoon. My small celebration was swiftly dismantled. "We can't possibly miss this, Audra," my mother had explained, her hands already busy packing a cooler for the stables. "You understand." I spent my birthday in the stands of a dusty arena, watching my sister take a blue ribbon while my own birthday cake, a simple vanilla sponge I'd been looking forward to, sat forgotten on the kitchen counter at home. For Stella's 16th birthday, my parents rented a sailboat for a sunset cruise around the bay for 50 of her friends. For mine, 2 years later, my mother forgot to pick up the custom cake I'd chosen and presented me with a box of assorted grocery store donuts. "An assortment is more fun, don't you think?" she'd said, avoiding my eyes. I ate a plain glazed one and pretended it was what I'd wanted all along. My father, Robert, a respected architect whose firm, Kane and Associates, had designed half the landmark buildings in Seagrove, was a quiet man, but his pride in Stella was a tangible force in our home. He would rearrange his entire schedule to attend her mock trials in law school, flying across the country at a moment's notice. When I presented my graduate thesis, a project I had poured 2 years of my life into, I scanned the small auditorium and found 2 empty seats where my parents were supposed to be. A last-minute client meeting came up, my father explained later over the phone, his apology sounding distant and practiced. I never told them that I'd won the department's award for my research. It didn't seem to matter. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, I carved out a life for myself that was wholly my own. I found solace and purpose in the hushed, orderly world of the Seagrove Historical Society. I saved my modest salary, and at 27 I bought a small cottage nestled in a quiet neighborhood, its garden overgrown with lavender and climbing roses. It was my sanctuary, a place where I was not Stella's sister, but simply Audra. My parents had never visited. When Stella announced her engagement to Julian Croft, the heir to the vast Croft Holdings real estate empire, my parents were euphoric. "It's everything we've ever wanted for her," my mother had sighed during this celebratory dinner at the Seagrove Yacht Club, her eyes shining with tears of joy. I sat beside her, sipping my water, and wondered if they had ever spent a moment wanting anything for me. The year leading up to the wedding was a whirlwind of planning, a storm of tulle and peonies that I was expected to witness, but not participate in. Every Sunday dinner at my parents' house was a war room for wedding strategy. I would listen to my mother and Stella debate the merits of calligraphed invitations versus engraved ones, their heads bent together over swatches of silk, while I sat on the periphery, a ghost at my own family's table. The final, sharpest cut came 3 months before the wedding. I learned, through a forwarded email from a cousin, that I wasn't a bridesmaid. When I found the courage to ask Stella about it, her response was delivered with a placid smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Audra, I just wanted my very closest friends. The bridal party is already so large. You understand, don't you? It's less pressure on you this way." The implication was clear. I was not one of her closest friends. I sought out my mother, hoping for a sliver of advocacy, of maternal protection. I found her in the sunroom, arranging flowers in a vase. "Audra, you must not make this difficult," she said, her focus on snipping a stem of delphinium. "This is Stella's time to shine. She gets to make these choices. Your role is to support her, quietly." In the quiet of that sun-drenched room, with the scent of flowers heavy in the air, I felt something inside me shift. A fine, hairline crack appeared in the foundation of duty and acceptance I had built over a lifetime. It was the first tremor of a coming earthquake, the first sign that the quiet, supportive role I had been assigned was one I was no longer willing to play. I would go to this wedding. I would watch my sister shine. And in doing so, I would make the most significant decision of my life. The week before the wedding felt like a slow, elegant procession of my own insignificance. Each event was a masterclass in my family's hierarchy. The bridal shower was held in the garden of the Croft estate, a sprawling property overlooking the ocean. 30 women in floral dresses sipped elderflower champagne while Stella opened a mountain of extravagant gifts. I had spent weeks painstakingly restoring a beautiful, antique leather-bound book of coastal maps for Julian, a fellow history enthusiast, and a first-edition poetry collection for Stella. She opened them, murmured a polite, "Oh, how thoughtful," and set them aside in favor of a platinum serving platter from one of her law school friends, which my mother praised for a full 5 minutes. I was seated at a table with some of Julian's distant aunts, who made pleasant but vague conversation, clearly unsure of who the quiet, dark-haired girl was. The rehearsal dinner, held at a chic waterfront restaurant called The Anchor, was an even starker illustration of my place. Julian's parents, the formidable but gracious Edward and Margaret Croft, were the epitome of old-world class. Margaret, her silver hair coiled in an elegant chignon, sought me out during the cocktail hour. "Audra, dear," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "I trust you'll be at the family table with us tomorrow? Edward and I are so looking forward to getting to know you better." A hot flush of shame crept up my neck. "Actually, I believe I'm at table 14, I managed, forcing a smile. "With some of my mother's friends from her charity board." Margaret's perfectly arched eyebrows lifted in surprise. "How unusual," she remarked, her polite tone failing to conceal her confusion. "I've never known a bride's sister to be seated anywhere but with the immediate family." Her observation was not a judgment, but a simple statement of fact that underscored the deliberate nature of my exclusion. Later that evening, I went in search of the restroom and took a wrong turn down a quiet, wood-paneled hallway. I was about to turn back when I heard their voices drifting from a small private dining room, Stella's, light and musical, and my mother's, a soft counterpoint. "Honestly, that dress Audra is wearing," Stella was saying, a note of derision in her tone. "It's a perfectly nice dress, I suppose, but it's so subdued. She just fades into the background." "Well, that's for the best, isn't it?" my mother replied, and the casual cruelty of her words struck me like a physical blow. "I've put her at a table near the back tomorrow. We need the focus to be on you and Julian, not on Audra looking uncomfortable." They shared a soft laugh, a sound of intimate, shared understanding that excluded me completely. "Did you see Margaret Croft talking to her?" Stella asked. I almost died. God knows what Audra said. probably bored her to tears talking about dusty old books. Some people are born to be in the spotlight, and some are born to be in the audience, my mother said, her voice filled with a philosophical certainty that was reserved only for validating Stella. We've always known which one you are, my love. I backed away from the door, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I retreated to the ladies' room and stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror. My face, the face I had always found plain in comparison to my sister's, looked back at me, pale and stricken. For my entire life, I had believed their narrative, that Stella was special and I was not. But in that moment, hearing their careless dismissal, I understood. It wasn't about being special. It was about power. My quietness, my refusal to play their games of social maneuvering, was not a deficiency in me, but a threat to their carefully curated world. The wedding day arrived on a breath of sea-scented air, the sky a perfect, cloudless blue. A sense of duty I could not yet shake propelled me to the bridal suite at the Maritime Hotel early that morning. Stella, sipping a mimosa, immediately tasked me with organizing the welcome baskets for the out-of-town guests while she and her bridesmaids had their hair and makeup done by a team of stylists. "Audra, be a dear and make sure the labels are all facing forward," she'd instructed without looking at me. I spent an hour arranging miniature bottles of local gin and artisanal chocolates while the suite filled with laughter and celebratory chatter. At lunchtime, a cart laden with gourmet sandwiches and salads was wheeled in for the bridal party. When I reached for a small plate, Stella's hand shot out. "Oh, that's just for the bridesmaids," she said breezily. "They've been here for hours." "I think there might be some coffee and pastries down in the main lobby." There weren't. I bought a granola bar from a vending machine near the ice machine. As the afternoon wore on, Stella's behavior grew more erratic. She berated a makeup artist for the shade of her lipstick, reduced a bridesmaid to tears over a misplaced hairpin, and threatened to fire the photographer for suggesting a candid shot. My mother hovered over her, placating and cooing, murmuring that her darling girl was just feeling the pressure and deserved absolute perfection. During a rare moment of quiet, when the bridesmaids had gone to get dressed, I slipped into the bridal suite's main room to retrieve my shawl. Stella's designer handbag lay open on a velvet chaise lounge. Spilling from it was a small, familiar-looking ledger. It was the private accounting book from my father's firm, one I recognized from the few times I'd helped him organize his office. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. I knew I shouldn't look, that it was a profound violation of privacy. But the conversation I'd overheard the night before had redrawn all my personal boundaries. My fingers, trembling slightly, opened the book. The pages were filled with my sister's elegant script, detailing a series of financial transfers. With a growing sense of horror, I realized I was looking at a meticulous record of embezzlement. Over the past 18 months, Stella had been systematically siphoning funds from my father's business accounts, client retainers, operating capital, and moving the money into a personal offshore account. The total was staggering, well over $1 million. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and, with practiced archival precision, photographed page after damning page. I had just slipped the ledger back into her handbag when Stella's phone, lying next to it, lit up with a text message. I averted my eyes, but the preview on the screen was impossible to miss. It was from Mark, Julian's best man. "Can't wait for our private celebration later. Suite 1218. Don't be late." The implication was nauseatingly clear. My perfect sister was not only a thief but was also planning to betray her new husband on their wedding night. My first instinct was to run, to find my father, to expose everything right then and there. But a lifetime of being dismissed, of having my words and feelings invalidated, held me back. They would deny it. They would call me jealous and hysterical. They would close ranks and protect Stella, as they always had. No, this required more than an emotional outburst. It required the one thing I was an expert in: careful, methodical presentation of evidence. I slipped my phone into my clutch, my resolve hardening into something cold and sharp. I would go to my sister's wedding. I would bear witness. And for the first time in my life, I would ensure the truth was not overlooked. The grand ballroom of the Maritime Hotel was a symphony in white and gold. Thousands of cream-colored roses and cascades of orchids scented the air, and a string quartet played Vivaldi as the 400 guests found their seats. My own seat, as promised, was at table 14, tucked away in a corner near the service entrance, partially obscured by a potted palm. My tablemates were, as my mother had said, members of her charity board, lovely women who smiled at me kindly but had no idea who I was. I could see my own family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all seated in the front rows, a warm, cohesive unit from which I had been surgically removed. The ceremony began. The bridesmaids, in their pale gold silk gowns, floated down the aisle. Then the music swelled, and Stella appeared on our father's arm. She was breathtaking. Her gown, a cloud of lace and hand-sewn pearls, shimmered under the chandeliers. Our father beamed, his face alight with a pride so profound it was almost painful to watch. It was a look he had never once given me. The vows were exchanged, rings were placed on fingers, and the kiss was sealed. The room erupted in applause. I clapped along, my hands feeling disconnected from my body, my mind a world away, calculating and calm. The reception was even more opulent. A 5-course meal was served, champagne flowed freely, and a live band played jazz standards. I moved through the evening in a state of quiet observation. My father stopped by my table for a moment, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder. "You look nice, Audra. Are you having a good time?" he asked, his attention already drifting toward a city councilman at the next table. My mother didn't approach me at all. As dessert was served, a towering, 7-tiered wedding cake adorned with sugar flowers, I slipped away to the hotel's quiet library. I took out my phone and composed a single, carefully worded email. The subject line was simple: information regarding Stella Kane and Associates. I attached the photographs of the ledger and the screenshot of the text message. My heart pounded a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. This was the point of no return. This act would shatter our family, perhaps irrevocably. For a moment, I faltered. I thought about deleting the email, walking out of the hotel, and simply disappearing from their lives forever. But then I heard my mother's voice in my head. Some people are born to be in the audience. The quiet dignity I had cultivated my whole life demanded more than a silent retreat. It demanded the truth. I addressed the email to 3 people: my father, Robert Kane, Julian Croft, and his father, Edward Croft. I hit send. Then I deleted the email from my sent folder, cleared my phone's cache, and walked back into the ballroom. I returned to my seat just as the bandleader was announcing the toasts. The best man, Mark, gave a slick, charming speech. The maid of honor gushed about Stella's loyalty and kindness. Then my mother stood, her crystal flute catching the light. She looked regal in her navy silk gown, the perfect matriarch of a perfect family. "To my daughter, Stella," she began, her voice clear and proud. "From the moment she was born, she has been a shining light, a source of endless pride and joy. She has always known what she wants and has had the grace and intelligence to achieve it." My mother paused, her eyes sweeping the room before landing, for a brief, cold moment, on me. As a mother, my greatest wish was to see my daughter find a happiness as bright as she is. "Julian, you have given her that." She raised her glass. "To Stella, the daughter who has made all our dreams come true." "To Stella," the room echoed. I watched my sister, who was basking in the adoration. Her eyes met mine across the crowded room, and a small, triumphant smile played on her lips. It was a smile that said, "I win. I always win." And then a phone chimed at the head table. It was Julian. He glanced down, his expression shifting from polite attention to confusion. Across the room at the Crofts table, Edward's phone chimed as well. I saw him tap the screen, his jovial expression freezing, then darkening into a thunderous scowl. He leaned over and showed the phone to his wife, Margaret, whose hand flew to her mouth. Then my father's phone chimed. He frowned, annoyed at the interruption, and then looked at the screen. The color drained from his face. He stared at his phone as if it were a venomous snake, his knuckles white as he gripped it. Julian was now staring at his own screen, his face a mask of disbelief. He slowly lifted his head, his eyes, full of confusion and a dawning horror, finding Mark, his best man. Then he looked at his new wife. "Stella," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "What is this?" Stella's smile faltered. "What's what, darling?" "It's probably just spam." "Sweet 1218, Julian said, his voice gaining a hard, sharp edge. "Is that spam, too?" "A private celebration with my best man." A collective gasp went through the room. The band trailed off into silence. Mark, the best man, had gone pale and was starting to rise from his seat as if to flee. My father was on his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He walked to the head table, his movements stiff. "The ledger," he said, his voice shaking with a rage I had never heard from him before. "The firm's private ledger." "What is this, Stella?" "Over $1 million to an offshore account." The room, already quiet, became unnervingly still. Every eye was on the head table, on the bride and groom, on the family whose perfect facade was cracking and shattering in real time. Stella looked from Julian's devastated face to our father's furious one, and her composure finally broke. I can explain," she stammered, her eyes darting wildly around the room. "Explain what?" Julian's voice cracked with pain. "That you're a thief? That you've been cheating on me? That this whole wedding, our whole relationship, is a lie." Edward Croft stood and walked to his son's side, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. His voice, when he spoke, was cold as ice. "Julian, we are leaving. Our lawyers will be in contact regarding an annulment." The chaos that erupted was swift and total. Guests began to murmur, then to stand, eager to escape the spectacular implosion. Stella, her face streaked with tears, finally seemed to understand. Her wild gaze swept the room and landed on me. In that moment, she knew. The quiet sister, the archivist, the keeper of records. "You," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this. You were always jealous." I didn't flinch. I simply met her gaze from across the room. My father turned, his own gaze finding me in my corner. There was shock in his eyes, but also, for the first time I could ever remember, a flicker of something else, a dawning, horrified understanding. Not of what I had done, but of why. The beautiful wedding was over. The shining light had been extinguished, revealing the darkness it had hidden for so long. And I, the shadow, had finally stepped out of the audience and into the truth. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I simply felt still. The earthquake had come, and the ground had finally stopped shaking. I was still standing. The grand ballroom, a monument to a fantasy, emptied with the quiet haste of people fleeing the scene of an accident. The hotel staff began to clear away the debris of the fallen party, half-eaten plates of cake, abandoned champagne flutes, and the wilting floral arrangements that now seemed funereal. My father found me at my table. "The manager has given us a private suite," he said, his voice strained. "We need to talk." In the sterile quiet of the Wellington suite, the four of us stood in the wreckage of our family. Stella, still in her magnificent wedding gown, had collapsed into a chair, her sobs now dry, angry rasps. "How could you, Audra?" she hissed. "To destroy my life on my wedding day." "Your life isn't destroyed, Stella," I said, my voice even. "Your narrative is. There's a difference." My mother, looking fragile and lost for the first time in my life, turned on me. "This was a family matter, Audra. You aired our private affairs in front of the entire city." The humiliation. Was it a private matter when you and Stella laughed about hiding me in the back of the room? I asked gently. Was it a private matter when Stella was stealing from Dad's clients? People who trusted him? Or was that just another secret we were all supposed to keep to protect her? My father, who had been staring out the window at the dark water of the bay, finally spoke. The money is real. I've cross-referenced the transaction numbers she recorded in the ledger. It's all there. Over $1 million. He turned to face Stella, his face etched with a sorrow so deep it seemed to age him before my eyes. Why, Stella? Why would you risk everything? Our firm, your future, our family's name. Stella's answer was a tear-choked whisper. Because I had to. The Crofts, their world is so different. The expectations, the pressure. I needed to keep up. I was going to pay it back. You don't keep up with lies and theft, he said, his voice devoid of its usual paternal indulgence. He looked at her as if seeing her for the very first time, not as his shining light, but as a stranger. I felt a profound weariness settle over me. This was the endgame of a lifetime of skewed dynamics. I'm going home, I announced quietly. You don't get to just walk away, my mother said, a flash of her old authority returning. You're the one who lit the match. I looked at my mother, at the woman who had taught me my own invisibility. No, I said softly. The fire was already burning. I just opened the door so we could all see the flames. Why, Audra? My father asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why this way? I thought for a moment, seeking the truest words. Because you were all so busy looking at the sun, you forgot that shadows are cast by something solid. I just wanted to feel my own weight. I needed to know that my truth mattered, even if it was inconvenient. A heavy silence filled the room. In that silence, I saw the first cracks appear in my father's denial and my mother's carefully constructed reality. I need some space, I said, walking to the door. I won't be coming to Sunday dinner for a while. I think we all have a lot to think about. As I opened the door, my father's voice stopped me. Audra. I turned back. He looked lost, adrift in the ruins of his own making. He struggled for a moment, then managed 2 words. I'm sorry. They were not a cure. They were not a resolution. But they were a beginning. A pinprick of light in a lifetime of darkness. Me too, Dad, I whispered, and then I walked out into the cool night air, leaving them to their shattered dreams, ready, at last, to start building my own. 6 months have passed since the wedding that wasn't. Autumn has given way to the quiet introspection of winter in Seagrove. The sea is often gray and restless, and the bare branches of the oak trees trace delicate patterns against the sky. In the quiet of my little cottage, I have found a peace I never knew was possible. The aftermath was messy, as all true things are. My father, with the help of a discreet legal team, managed the crisis at his firm. He used his personal savings to replace every stolen dollar, saving the company from ruin but severely depleting his own finances. Criminal charges were avoided, but Stella was forced to sign over the trust fund our grandparents had left her to begin repaying our father. Her engagement was, of course, over. The Crofts handled the annulment with quiet, dignified speed. Julian sent me a single, handwritten note a month after the wedding. It said only, "Thank you for the truth, however painful. I wish you peace." Stella moved to another city. I hear, through the family grapevine, that she is working in a junior role at a large corporation, the first time in her life she has not been in a position of power and admiration. We have not spoken. Perhaps we never will. Some fractures are too deep to ever fully mend. My parents and I are navigating a new, fragile territory. My father calls me every week. Our conversations are often stilted, filled with the ghosts of all the things we never said, but we are talking. He is trying to learn the language of the daughter he never really knew. He came to my cottage for the first time a few weeks ago, and we sat in my garden, drinking tea in the pale winter sun. He looked at the lavender and roses, dormant but not dead, and said, "You've built a beautiful life for yourself, Audra." It was the highest praise he had ever given me. My mother's journey is more complicated. She has started seeing a therapist, an admission that I know cost her a great deal of pride. Our weekly coffees are hesitant, tentative explorations of a relationship that needs to be rebuilt from the foundation up. She still grieves for the loss of the perfect family she thought she had, but beneath the grief, I see flickers of a woman trying to understand her own complicity. I thought I was giving Stella what she needed to succeed, she told me last week, her eyes fixed on her cup. I never stopped to think about what you needed. I just needed to be seen, I told her. The healing is not complete. Perhaps it never will be. But it is real. I no longer feel like a footnote. In the quiet stacks of the historical society, surrounded by the stories of the past, I feel the steady weight of my own present. I am learning that self-worth is not something that is given to you by others. It is a quiet, sturdy thing you build inside yourself, one true action at a time. If you have ever felt like a shadow in your own life, know that your story has value, your voice has weight, and your truth matters. Standing up for it may be the hardest thing you ever do, but it is also the first step toward finding the person you were always meant to be. Sometimes, the most profound act of love is not to keep the peace, but to speak the truth, no matter how much the ground shakes beneath you. For in the quiet after the earthquake, you may just find the space to finally, truly begin to grow.